Bellevue Chamber's Guy Palumbo. We working yet? Here we go. All right, all right. Okay, everybody, settle down, settle down. All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Bellevue Chamber's 2026 Eastside Real Estate Symposium. So thank you very much for coming today. I'm Guy Palumbo. I am the Public Policy Director for Amazon, but really, for those that really know me, I am the Executive Assistant to Pearl Lung, who you all know and appreciate. So before we get started today, I just want to we're going to do a bunch of thank yous. First, I want to thank our co-presenting sponsor, Microsoft. Where's Microsoft's table? Somewhere? There you are. Hi. I can't see you. There's lights. Thank you, Microsoft. Major sponsor, KG Investments, wherever you may be. Yeah, let's go, KG. Corporate sponsors, JP Morgan, Clark Newberg, and IMA, where you're all spread out. We love you. Thank you very much. We're gonna get to, come on, let's get our clapping on. I know it's 7:30. Joe likes early morning meetings. Come on, let's get a little energy going. Associate sponsors, the Seattle King County Realtors, who we all love and dearly. The supporting sponsors, Selling Construction, Rally Properties, Republic Services, and the City of Bellevue. Excellent. And then we're also going to thank our legacy leaders. These are 17 organizations that have demonstrated deep commitment to the Bellevue Chamber and to the community at large. So thank you all legacy leaders. And we want to also acknowledge our executive circle members, which includes a range of mid-sized companies that have very, very strong ties to the community here in Bellevue and the East Side. And we're going to talk about board members. So we have a lot of Bellevue board members in the room. Can you all please stand up so we can clap at you? Please, if you're a chamber board member. Thank you very much. And as always, we have a number of wonderful public servants that are our elected partners in this fight for housing and real estate. Could you all please stand up as well if you're an elected official? We want to see where you are, and thank you. And as always, I throw a curveball that Joe didn't ask me for. If you are staff at any of the cities that we deal with that are in the room today, could you also stand up, please? City staff, please stand up. Thank you very much. We often forget that they actually do the work that makes all of us look good, so thank you very much, city staff. A few housekeeping notes. There are a few QR codes on your tables, and you can submit questions, and apparently Joe's going to put up questions throughout the presentation, so there'll be questions up there. Oh, look, there's one right now. What is this? Oh, okay, this is interesting. Find out who's in the room. So please use that QR code and vote as we go along, and he throws up new ones. Yeah, thank you very much. Okay, so if you are in this room, it means you care about housing. I think that's probably pretty safe, right? You care about housing, you care about real estate. You didn't come here to hear more jokes about Mayor Malakutian's non-conforming cheekbones. You did not come here today to hear about Mayor Mullet's rebranding of the city of Issaquah to get his light rail line. And you did not come to hear about the $8 billion Seattle levy to find out about affordability. By the way, that was the best one for those of us that work in lobbying. I sent that to a whole bunch of people, and it legitimately worked. Like, I have consultants in Olympia that thought all day that was true because it was a little too close to reality, right? You know, like, that was a good one, Joe. That was a good one. And seriously, does anybody love April Fools more than Joe Fain? Like, I look forward to it every year. I think that's your favorite holiday. It was great. Okay, I digress. About housing. So obviously at Amazon, we also care about housing. That's why we launched our $3.6 billion housing fund, which has preserved or created 10,000 units locally since its inception in 2020. And just here in Bellevue, we've been able to increase the stock of affordable housing by 31%, so we're very proud of that. But I do want to use this moment to thank our friends over in Redmond down here, because if it wasn't for them, we probably wouldn't have done that. They were very kind, and they were the first movers in the technology industry to get out there and get into this affordable housing space. So I just want to thank Microsoft. Okay. You know, one of the things that you may or may not know is that the Bellevue Chamber has really become, very quietly, one of the most effective organizations in the state as it pertains to housing policy and real estate policy. They don't get flashy. You know, they're sometimes overshadowed by our good friend over in Seattle, as we like to call him, West Side Joe compared to East Side Joe, and our state groups that are playing in a bigger pond. They get bigger, you know, they get bigger play and they get more PR. But The Bellevue Chamber has really been absolutely impressive. And when I did this, when Joe asked me to do this, I said, only if I can put up the wins that you have had so that everybody can actually see all of the good work that the Bellevue Chamber has been doing over the last few years. So they're going to show a couple of slides here, but you can kind of get a read and a sense of all the things that they've been a part of. And, it's not about just them doing it on their own. What they have found is a winning formula, which is the way public policy is supposed to be done. So they partner with our elected officials in the room and our city staff. They figure out what it is and where the vision is for the city, especially in Bellevue. What do the elected officials put in their comp plan? What do they want their city to look like in 10 and 20 years? And then they work together to make the best possible policy. Having a data-driven approach to accomplish shared goals is really what we're supposed to be doing every day at the state and the local level. And sadly, that's not often the case. But Bellevue has really figured that out. Just being an honest broker about the best possible data, what pencils today in today's market, not what do we wish would pencil one day down the line. And, the results really do speak for themselves. And I know this is not a fundraiser, but I told Joe that I was going to do it, so too bad, Joe. The Bellevue Chamber needs your help. If you're in the room today and you care about housing and you care about wins like this in our region for housing, they need your support. If you're a large company like Amazon in the room or a large developer that benefits from some of these policies, please consider writing a 5-figure check to the Bellevue Chamber. If you're an individual or you're a nonprofit or you're a smaller business in the room that maybe isn't a member yet, at whatever level, $500, whatever it is, that you can be a member of the Bellevue Chamber so we can continue this work, please think about doing that. Because these wins don't come easy. They come because you have good staff, and staff costs money. And this is something that the Bellevue Chamber wants to keep doing. We want them to keep doing in the region. They're playing a much bigger role outside of just a couple of cities on the east side. They've been playing at the state level as well. And they need your support. So that's over. I promised them I would do that. Please think about it if you get a chance. Okay, with that, we're going to move into programming. So we're going to be kicking it off to start with a local development pipeline overview from Brian Oliver, who's the Senior Vice President at CBRE. So please let me welcome Brian to the stage.
I was raised here in Bellevue, went to Bellevue High School, grew up here, moved back here after college, and have been working in the Bellevue Eastside market for about 18 years. So I'm very excited about all that is happening here in Bellevue, Washington, and in the overall Eastside. I will be getting into some of the development pipeline, but thought maybe I could touch on just the overall market dynamics and even start in Seattle, because as we're all seeing and hearing, Seattle has been hurting quite a bit. And you're starting to see a lot of companies who are based in Seattle looking over on this side of the lake. And then a lot of the tech and Bay Area companies that used to focus on Seattle, they're now spending more of their time and energy looking here on this side of the lake as well. So Seattle market overview, about 35% vacant, which is extremely high. And it's about a 60 million square foot market. And we expect that vacancy to remain relatively flat. If you take out some of the buildings that are obsolete and or buildings that can't transact, maybe they're in receivership, Columbia Center being one of them, you're probably closer to 25 to 27% vacant. Still a healthy market if you're a tenant. Not so great if you are a landlord. Top tier buildings in this market, so think Russell Investment Center, formerly Russell Investment Center, now JP Morgan Chase. You could do a deal there in the 60 to 63 gross rent numbers. Putting that into perspective, you're going to be 80 plus for high end here in Bellevue. As I mentioned, 35% vacancy in Seattle, not a ton of demand. We are expecting that that's going to stay relatively flat for the foreseeable future. Office requirements in Seattle, again, 60 million square feet. You've got about 1.2 million square feet of active requirements, a lot of which are renewals that are out leveraging, seeing if they can upgrade from, maybe a kind of mid-tier building and take advantage of what's going on in Seattle and upgrade their space. I'm sure a lot of you heard this flight to quality. It's definitely still a thing, I think, for tenants who are trying to bring their employees back to the office. If they can upgrade their space and pay a similar rent to what they've been paying, previously, they're trying to take advantage of that. All right, now to the east side. Eastside's been doing great. I know we've heard a lot of news about OpenAI and others who are moving to this market. That being said, Bellevue CBD, and I do apologize, this is our Q4 25 market report. We are likely going to have our Q1 26 out here in about 2 weeks. I'll show my email at the end. If people want to reach out and get on our email list, we can make sure you're part of that. But 25% vacant, a couple leases that have happened Q1 and a couple that are very, very close, specifically at 4106. We expect that to come down to closer to about 20% vacant. The Bellevue market, CBD market's about 13.5 million square feet, maybe 14 million square feet, and our friends at Amazon are about 40% of that. So when you look at what we really have to play with from a tenant perspective, a lot smaller than what Seattle is. Again, we're about 25.9%. This is overall east side. Bellevue CBD is pretty much in line with what we're seeing on the overall east side. But like I said earlier, you're looking at probably close to 20%. 20%, I would say, once these deals get done, assuming that they do. And this does also include Bravern, which we're expecting is going to have a new owner probably within the next couple months. They've been touring different buyers to come and take that. And I think you're seeing a lot of interest from building owners to go and take that building, because while the market's 20% or will be about 20% vacant, if you're a floor or two, you've got plenty of options. If you're 5 floors or more, there's not very many. If you're 200, 300,000 square feet, there's effectively going to be none here pretty soon, aside from Bravern. Office requirements. So again, we're about 2.4 million square feet of active groups looking in the market. A lot of that's technology and AI. When you put that in perspective with just what the amount of product we have here, it's a pretty healthy, active community looking for space here. Again, when you looked at Seattle, it was about 2.1 million square feet and 60 million square feet available, or 60 million square foot market. All right, now the development pipeline. Let me see, I think I got a little laser here. All right. So I know a lot of people have been asking, what does this mean for new development? Typically in a market, you don't see developers wanting to develop when there's high teens or low 20s vacancy. I would imagine that will hold true. You've got Skanska, who is right here. They can do about 200,000 square feet right next to the 8. They will probably consider going spec, but they won't do anything until they have the opportunity to sell the 8, and the 8 has a little over 100,000 square feet left that they need to lease. So my gut would say that, again, if they lease the 8, sell it, they would likely be the group that would go spec. Of course, if there's a pre-lease, that's a different conversation. And then the other, I don't know how to back up. The other one is Schnitzer has, there we go. Schnitzer, the Arcadian, they have talked about going spec as well. Their basis in that land is low enough to where they're telling us that they could do a deal in the low 70s net for new construction. There are other building owners or developers that bought a little bit later in the cycle, and we're hearing that they need something closer to 90 net to justify new development. A lot of the local Bellevue companies hear those numbers, and they're pretty scary. But when you're talking to companies that are coming up from the Bay Area and they're used to paying quite a bit more than that, that doesn't seem to bother them all that much. But I would say over the next 3 years, it's unlikely any of these developers decide to go spec. Obviously, a pre-lease, most of which would require 30 to 50% pre-lease on the building, or again, if Skanska is able to sell the 8, I would imagine that they would be the next group that would go spec. And that is all that I have for today. Like I said, this was a lot of this was our old data. We just finished Q1. We should have the updated marketing information for Q1 here in the next 2 to 3 weeks. You can feel free to email me or Joey, who is our client services manager, and ask to get put on our email list, and we will make sure that you're getting more up-to-date information as it relates to the Eastside. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you, Brian. That was a great grounding for us to start off the morning. As they said, my name is Barb Wilson, and I do local government affairs at Microsoft. And again, we're really delighted to be a co-presenting sponsor with our good friends at Amazon. So I always love this event. It's such a great opportunity for all of us to come together. I see so many familiar faces in this room of all of us who have been so dedicated to tackling what is probably one of our biggest challenges for the region, and that is how do we get more affordability with our housing? How do we ensure that everybody has an affordable place to live? And based on this presentation, I think our other big challenge is what is our economic development strategy and how do we bring more jobs to the region? So it is a great call for all of us in business, government, philanthropy, and community organizations to work together at scale to deal with the demand, deal with the challenges ahead. Let's now move in to our very first panel, which is called Policies and Practices. And this is going to cover the alphabet soup of housing policy. It's broken down for experts and for normies alike, addressing all the laws currently in place and the best practices for actually getting things built here on the East Side. So now I'm going to do some rapid fire introductions of each of our panelists, and I will welcome them to the stage. So first we have Saf Raba, the co-founder and CEO of GovStream AI, a Seattle area startup developing AI native tools to accelerate local government permitting, both housing and infrastructure. The company aims to reduce permit turnaround times by 30 to 50% using conversational AI, and they already have active pilots here in cities like Bellevue and looking to expand. Yes, take a seat. We also have Nick Whipple, who's a code and policy director with the City of Bellevue's Department of Development Services. Nick has worked as a public sector urban planner in the Puget Sound region for over a decade. As a planner in Bellevue, his work includes engaging with a diverse community of stakeholders, advising elected and appointed officials on land use and housing policy, and overseeing a team of planners responsible for developing land use and zoning regulations. We also have Senator Jessica Bateman from the 22nd Legislative District in Washington State. Many of us know her for her important work as a champion of affordable housing, sponsoring the landmark middle housing legislation, HB 1110, back in 2023. And last but not least, our moderator for the panel and my good friend, Ian Morrison, a partner at McCullough Hill. Ian's practice focuses on land use entitlements with an emphasis on working in Puget Sound jurisdictions specifically working with developers and owners to create and execute strategies that provide predictable, cost-effective pathways. Thank you all for being here. I'm looking forward to hearing and for you sharing your expertise. Everyone, welcome me in joining our first panel.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Barb, and thank you all for being here. As Barb mentioned, my name's Ian Morrison, and I have the pleasure of being the moderator at this panel on policy and practice. We have a great set of panelists here, so let's dive in. This first question I'm going to open up to all of you, but I'll start with Senator Bateman. Can you describe a little bit about how you play in the development space and what your day-to-day life looks like, especially as it relates to the growth of housing generally and in the East Side?
Hi, is the microphone working? Hi, everyone. We'll switch. All right, there we go. Hi, everyone. My name's Jessica Bateman, and I am from Olympia, Washington. I serve for the 22nd Legislative District representing Olympia, Lacey, and Tumwater, which encompasses our state's capital, so I'm very happy to visit with you today. My role in this question is a little different. As the chair of the Housing Committee in the Senate, I'm really focused on our statewide overall strategy as it relates to how we're making sure we're building enough housing to keep up with population growth. I was elected to the legislature in 2020, began my service in the House in 2021, have been on a housing committee ever since. And since I've gotten there, my previous role was on the Olympia City Council, and before that I was an Olympia Planning Commissioner. So I got to see up close what our land use policies, our comprehensive planning processes, and how we create that vision for how we're going to grow and accommodate population growth actually comes to fruition by going through that public engagement process. My inspiration for focusing steadily on increasing supply comes directly from that experience. So every policy that we have before the Housing Committee in the Senate, I'm thinking about how do we make it more efficient, more cost-effective, and less time-consuming to build housing of all shapes and sizes. There's really been a new renaissance of thinking about housing supply in the legislature since I arrived. We used to focus more on the symptoms of not having enough housing, like rent assistance, affordable housing, subsidized housing. And since I've gotten there, as our housing supply problem has continued to grow and we've seen the ramifications of that, we really have a consensus now, at least in my caucus. I think for a while we've had it in the Republican caucus, that we need to focus solely on supply because that is the root of our challenges. We're not building enough housing to keep up with population growth. So how do we accomplish that goal? And so my first committee meeting as a senator chairing the Housing Committee in the Senate, I brought in developers, small scale, large scale, private sector, public sector, or affordable housing developers like Habitat for Humanity, national companies, and I had them walk through their pro formas to illustrate to my colleagues what goes into the cost, the per unit cost of housing in Washington state. What are the barriers creating that ultimate bottom line and the cost that we see reflected, because so often we focus on housing, new construction's not affordable, it's market rate, and a lot of my colleagues focus on that. But when you lift up the lid and you get to see all of those constraints, it's really common sense, and it's really about a couple characteristics that you all are very familiar with, but people that create policy aren't necessarily. So I've been doing my due diligence to do that, and working with the private sector, really appreciate the partnership with the chamber and other chambers on focusing on the supply side of this equation.
Thank you, Senator. Nick, I'll turn it over to you from the city perspective.
Okay, I think we're on. Hello everyone, my name is Nick Whipple. I'm an assistant director in our Development Services Department. So the Development Services Department at the City of Bellevue, our core responsibility is on permitting and inspection for development. And we also have a business services division that focuses on technology investments and houses our customer experience team that really gets the feedback from you all so that we can work on our process improvement areas. The specific role that I serve in the department, I oversee our code and policy division. And so this division is responsible for updating all of our development regulations. So we've been quite active, as has the state, in the past 5 years, really taking a hard look at our zoning rules and making sure that we are modernizing some of these zoning rules. with a lens towards let's reduce some of the barriers that housing and office development are confronted with, and let's try and update all of those codes to not only achieve some of the housing goals that we have for the city, which are pretty lofty, but also achieve some of our affordable housing goals as well. So we've been very active with our planning commission. I see a few planning commissioners in the room here, as well as council with some of our council members here as well. And of course in the community and with the Bellevue Chamber has always been a strong partner as we are looking towards updating our zoning rules.
Thanks, Nick. And Saf, that last question to you, what does a day-to-day life look like and as it relates to the Eastside growth real estate industry?
Yeah, so I'm Saf Rab. I'm the founder of a venture-backed startup that is entirely focused on streamlining permitting. It's not lost on anyone here. If we make permitting faster, simpler, more predictable, we're going to get more supply of housing. And that's what we work with cities to do. We are fortunate to partner with the city of Bellevue as our first customer. And our day-to-day really consists of identifying the bottlenecks and the things that get in the way of builders and city staff as they go about helping somebody on that permitting journey. And those bottlenecks, the good news is most of them are actually solvable. And we're building technology, working with reviewers, planners, permit techs. And every time we identify a bottleneck, we try and build some technology tool that works both for the builder and for city staff in overcoming, all of these delays that just constrain the supply of housing and make what little gets built more expensive than it should be. And the cost that's not lost on us at all is all the projects that just kind of die on the vine before they even pass that feasibility test. So yeah, that's our day-to-day is working in the trenches in City Hall, working with developers, big and small, to identify ways that we can deploy technology to streamline this process.
Excellent. And that's very exciting. That's very exciting. Saf, I'm going to stay with you for a second. The good news is, as a moderator, I'm pretty loud, so you don't need that. Can we stay and say, Saf, you just mentioned your partnership with the city of Bellevue. Can you talk a little bit about how that's looked in its rollout, and then look at both the short term and the long term? How do you think the implementation of AI will impact the permitting process in the next year, and maybe what does the full implementation of AI look like in this space?
Yeah, we're extremely hopeful that the time has come to kind of turn this process that has really been gummed up by, in fact, an analogy I use often is before we digitized all of permitting, you used to be able to walk to City Hall with your plans and you unfurl the plan and have somebody who knows what they're doing kind of look over your shoulder and have a conversation with a land use planner, a building reviewer, and they would give you guidance, right? They would help you kind of figure out what needs to be built, how it could be built, and actually help set you up for success. The last 15 or so years have been spent digitizing everything. So now it's a portal. You talk to a portal, and we all know the portal doesn't talk back, right? You submit things. Everything has become so transactional that human conversation between a builder and a city has all but disappeared. And that leaves builders, whether it's a homeowner who wants to build a garage or an ADU or a big developer looking at the latest big development in downtown Bellevue or Kirkland, to basically just kind of navigate this transactional world. So when we partnered with the city of Bellevue, we're really fortunate because Bellevue is extremely motivated to streamline this process and speed it up for everyone and make it simpler. So the will is there, which made Bellevue just an amazing partner for us, but also took a holistic approach to deploying AI. AI is super buzzworthy these days. Some people think it's going to save all our problems. Some people think it's going to destroy humanity. But like everything else, it's a technology that needs to be designed and implemented in a thoughtful, responsible way. And we took a holistic approach, starting with the first step of permitting. When people have questions about, hey, can I build this thing here? What's the process? Do I need a permit? What kind of permit? What are the steps? All the way to the next phase of our partnership deals with the application process. I think you've all experienced it firsthand. You submit an application, you're dealing with this portal, it's asking questions that honestly no one understands. You go through all of that process, and a very, very high percentage of applications are rejected the first time. Why? Because they're incomplete. Well, why are they incomplete? Because the guides are unclear, right? People try to navigate that application process, and they don't know that there is a slope or some sort of a environmentally critical constraint. And as a result, they need a geotechnical report. And they only know that after they've submitted. So all of these are just kind of systematic friction points and bottlenecks due to that lack of conversation between the builder and the city that we hope to overcome in part by deploying AI. But it's not just AI. Most of the time it's just good old software development that doesn't have a lot of AI in it. But yeah, we're starting with the very first steps of permitting, but we've built a great foundation with the city of Bellevue, and we believe we can just accelerate the rollout of these AI assistants, both for builders and for city staff, so that things don't just kind of sit in a queue and accumulate all of these delays and kind of moments of oops. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, one last question before we move back to Nick and the senator. Saf, is there anything unique about building these technology tools with your partnership with the public sector? How is it interfacing and developing these technology solutions, AI or otherwise, with a government partner?
Yeah, there's something very unique about building technology for government. I've been in GovTech for 16 years now. This is our second startup. The first one was focused on open data, which is the idea of making government data broadly available, accessible, and use it as fuel for not only transparency, but economic development. This time, we're focused squarely on permitting and development. But in all cases, working with government is very unique for a number of reasons. One is, lots of people say, well, government should work like a business. There's some truth to that, but government, cannot choose its customers, for example, right? Government has a mission that exceeds financial sustainability. So part of deploying and building technology for government is trying to understand the constraints that government operates under and trying to really appreciate, if not embrace, the mission for the development services in Bellevue. What are they trying to do? What gets in their way? So that's one. The second is, particularly for AI, trust and accountability concerns are really heightened, right? Everything from is AI taking our jobs? The answer to that is no. To how can we trust this thing, right? What does it mean to deploy AI? How can we trust the answers? Is it operating as a black box? You can't have a black box doing stuff, no matter how wonderful, in a government environment. That box has to be completely transparent, has to be auditable, and has to be traceable. So just that threshold of what it means to deploy any technology, particularly AI, the bar is very, very high. And in the context of development, you don't want AI to be making decisions that are not only not transparent, but very consequential. So the stakes are higher. And then there is kind of like the whole complexity of a city government. A city government does so many things that if you just kind of look at the IT landscape that powers City Hall, it is, it would make a Fortune 500 company really look like a very coherent set of systems. So the complexity factor is extremely high. The stakes are high, and it's something that operates in the public eye under intense scrutiny. Mistakes are, amplified. So it has to be approached thoughtfully, responsibly, and the only way to do it, we believe, is to partner with the city, not just walk in as a vendor and say, look at my shiny, piece of software. It'd be crazy not to deploy it. Yeah.
Thank you, Steph. Nick, turning to the city, you heard from Guy a lot of successes that the city has accomplished in partnership with many in this room. Can you speak from the city's perspective? What have been the biggest priorities in the past couple years from the city's perspective since you've taken this new job? And what do you think that the city and you, in collaboration with the electeds and others, have made the most progress?
Yeah, I would say the Development Services, has been very focused on process improvement work over the past 3 to 5 years by really centering the voice of the customer. And in practice, we've done that in a couple of ways. We've really built out our customer experience program in the department, which has provided us really great tools to understand where are the pain points in a process. So for example, when you apply for a permit, you'll be getting a survey prompt at various points within that permit process so that we understand how things are going, if you've been experiencing any challenges. And that will happen from when you submit your permit application to typically when you get your first review decision from the department, and then once your permit is issued, and then even on through inspection. Through that information, we're really able to understand some of the themes that that the development community is experiencing, and have really a targeted approach to how we want to tackle those process improvement items. Another example, just about 2 years ago now, the Bellevue Development Committee was formed. This is a very helpful forum to really build relationships between city staff and the development community. We host meetings on a quarterly basis, and then we also have meetings on the off-quarter cycles where we're able to really dive into some specific areas that are of interest to the development community. So we bring forward code amendments, for example, for feedback in that forum. We also really use that forum to partner with the development community on some of those streamlining and process improvement efforts. So sometimes those off-quarter meetings are used for, we call them sub-teams, to be able to really tackle some of the tough challenges that the department is experiencing and that's being raised by many of the people in this room. And then I would say another major effort that we were able to make progress on just last year, the department did finalize its 5-year strategic plan, which was a huge effort. It also resulted in a new vision statement for the department, that vision statement being building the best Bellevue together. The words were very intentional. The together piece was also just an acknowledgement that the city doesn't build anything. We really do rely on our partners in the private sector to deliver the high quality built environment that we all enjoy and protect our natural environment as well. And so having that partnership has been really critical. As part of the strategic plan update, we also focused on different perspective areas to make sure that we are addressing kind of the broad landscape that the department has purview over. So it was really important that we addressed employee learning and growth. You're going to get better service when our staff are supported, when they have better training, when they're able to understand what customer service looks like in a regulatory context. So that was really critical. We also have the customer and community perspective area that we've been focusing on, and that's where our customer experience team has also been really helpful in advancing some of those strategic initiatives within that perspective area. We have our financial perspective area. I think Bellevue as a city really prides itself on being a fiscally responsible city. The Development Services Department also prides itself on being very fiscally strong. So we're able to manage our staffing levels as we hit kind of these volatile development cycles. We're able to hold on to our staffing in part because of good financial planning. So it's important that we kind of think ahead the next 5 years. What is that going to look like for us? And then then the final perspective area is more around our systems and processes. So really having some intentional efforts on not only are we going to, on the code side, try and simplify and improve the regulations so that we're removing some of the friction that developers and architects and designers are having to encounter, but we also want to be very intentional on how are we supporting projects through the permitting process, and what are the ways that we can have maybe some lighter touch permitting approaches for some of these items. Of course, we're having to balance that with some of the community expectations around what they would like to see out of development. I think our community is very interested in kind of what gets built where, how. Traffic concerns remain a high concern for folks, density, bulk, scale. We're having to confront a lot of those challenges and find the balance. So those kind of create maybe some of the constraints or the limits to how simplified we can make things. But we are certainly really working hard to find that balance. So proud of that strategic plan getting adopted to help set that direction for the next 5 years.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Nick. And you sort of just touched on a little bit of a prelude to my next question, which is, and I say this with love as a land use attorney, right? Historically, Bellevue has been maybe a more challenging perceived city to develop in because of some of those bespoke code issues and the high-touch administrative process. And I think to your credit and to the city's credit, there's been a notice in the industry of a shift in the past couple of years in terms of permit efficiency and permit processing efficiency. But there's still work to be done, and some of that is a reflection of some of the state laws that Senator Bateman and others have championed on looking at permitting timing. From the city's perspective, what are some of the biggest barriers to that additional streamlining, and how are you hoping to make progress on that within the next year or so?
Yeah, appreciate that, and appreciate the caveat with love, Ian. Yeah, it's a challenge to try and address some of the permitting issues alone, of course. And so that's where it's been really important that we've been able to create these forums for our partnerships so that we're all able to define the issue together, fully understand kind of both sides of the house here, what developers are experiencing, and as well as what the city is having to wrestle and balance. And so some of the ways that we're really trying to address our permitting challenge and streamline and speed up that permitting. We've got SAF here with GovStream AI. That's been a really critical piece to our solution development. There's a couple of ways that the partnership with GovStream AI is supporting permitting, some in a more direct way, some in more of an indirect way. Talking first about the direct way, the GovStream AI partnership is really helping applicants, as Saf mentioned, understand what some of the requirements are before applying for a permit, maybe surface some of those issues or flaws earlier in the process so they're better set up for a permit submission. And that's been really helpful, and we're excited to see kind of how we can continue evolving our partnership and working to provide better supports to applicants before they even get in the door. The other way that we're really excited about leveraging this new AI partnership is with our public information. So we have estimated about 20,000 staff hours annually is spent answering questions like, what's my setback? Do I need a permit for a deck? What are the conditions on my site that I need to be really concerned about? So what we are excited about is through this partnership, we've been able to basically load in the Bellevue Code, our public information, have it very specific to the Bellevue content so that we're able to support our review staff on providing responses to these public inquiries. And the payoff is going to be we're not going to spend 20,000 hours annually on staff time doing public information inquiries. Instead, we can have our permit review staff focus more on permit review. And of course, they'll have to validate those responses are still accurate. They're getting quite accurate in our testing right now. But that is going to be an ongoing process, and that will free up capacity then to really focus on the work of development review. And then, as I mentioned on the code side, there's a really concerted effort, and we've gotten strong support and direction from our city council to look at ways that we can simplify our regulations. We in Washington State and the Puget Sound region have a very complex regulatory environment. And so trying to find the ways that we might be able to simplify those as best as possible. Oftentimes, regulations get layered on over years. The Bellevue Code is guilty of that. It is kind of a Frankenstein code at this point. So we're looking to try and streamline that, clean it all up, and make that a little easier for folks on the development side as they're able to navigate through that and really self-serve. So no offense, Ian, they don't have to hire a land use attorney to get every land use entitlement through a process.
I'm looking forward to those days. Senator Bateman, you have been, my script says here a lead, but I'm going to editorialize. You've been an absolute rock star on housing policy, some of the most high impact, high visibility, and in some cases, controversial pieces of housing legislation since your time in the state legislature. Some of those, like the state middle housing bill, House Bill 1110 that you passed during 2023, could be perceived by some as placing a state mandate on local governments. We've heard from our friends in the AWC and from cities that the state's involvement in some of these local permitting processes are an intrusion on local control. But also, and again, I'm editorializing, as land use practitioners, we've seen how helpful it has been for the state to maybe push or encourage our friends in the cities to go a little bit further on ideas like parking reform and density and ADUs that are good ideas, but sometimes hard to pass at the city by city level. As you are legislating in Olympia, how do you balance these perspectives in creating policy?
Well, first, I have a lot of love for my city council members. So those of you that are on city council, thank you so much for your service. As a former city council member myself, I know how selfless that work is, and I appreciate it. The way that I evaluate policies on housing at a statewide level is I think about it from the perspective of the role of government, I think, is to make people's lives better. And when it comes to housing is a public good. It makes sure that we have competitiveness in Washington State, which we are currently at a disadvantage because we don't have enough housing. It ensures that people have intergenerational wealth building. My little sister's 30, just had a baby, double income, cannot afford to buy a home in any near future. And when it comes to how we're doing, we need to build 1.1 million homes over the next 20 years. Microsoft and Amazon came out with a report recently that showed we need to build 55,000 homes per year. We're at about 35,000 right now. We have hundreds of thousands already in our shortage, and every year we continue to fall further behind by tens of thousands of units. So when it comes to the measure of how are we doing as government to achieve the goal of making people's lives better by ensuring that we have abundant, attainable housing for all different types of income levels, I think it's safe to say that we're not achieving that goal. And how are our policies and our practices enabling us or serving as barriers to achieving those goals? My experience on city council, we tried to make some modest land use changes to legalize middle housing. It took us city size of 55,000, took us 3 years, 44 public meetings, 1,200 pages of written comment, 3 public hearings, and we were able to pass it. It got challenged by a very expensive land use attorney in Washington and went through an appeal process at the Growth Management Hearings Board. Eventually, we had to come back and pass another law after the legislature passed House Bill 1928. Thank you, Senator Mullet. So when I got to the legislature, I thought to myself, we have 280 cities in Washington. We have this housing crisis. I don't use that term easily. And we're not achieving this goal. We cannot afford to have this case-by-case process unfold. We need systemic change. We have an international building code, a state building code, we have city building codes, we have design review. We have all of these additional layers of process that's really intricate and reflective of local community ideas. And I say, it's really a luxury for us to be having discussions about the exterior color of a building being brick red or salmon red when we are so short on housing supply, which is why you've seen us focus in the last 3 to 5 years on the bottom line of, does this increase housing supply? And when I look at policy, I think, it's like I'm on the healthcare committee, I work in healthcare in my day job. First, do no harm. Does this policy do more harm? We don't always, sometimes we pass policies that do harm, but that's my lens that I'm thinking about, because when it comes to new policies that we're considering, because the problem is so vast and it's so systemic and it's so bureaucratic, any idea that we're coming forward with to create a solution, if it's not bold, it's not enough. And if it's bold, it's challenging the status quo, which is not working, and people are gonna have feelings about that. Ultimately, we need to ensure that we have buildings of all types that are safe. They need to match the building code, they need to have fire exits, all those things. But on top of that, really what we need to be doing is making it easier to build all different houses of different shapes and sizes. We've done things like modify parking requirements, making sure that we're legalizing ADUs, middle housing, co-living spaces, transit-oriented development, commercial to residential, just to name a few. We have more work to do, but that's really the lens that we have. And I would say, you know, when I worked on middle housing, I met with the cities, I did extensive work reaching out to them. And at the beginning of session, I sat down with a whole bunch of city council members and planners from all different cities. And what I said to them was this: I don't expect you to agree with my policy position. I'm not trying to persuade you. I want to make sure it's implementable. So if it passes, you can actually implement it at the local level, because I don't want to pass something that Bellevue's not going to be able to implement. And then also we're focusing on an array of options. Cities want to be unique, they want to have autonomy, they want choices. So with middle housing, we said, okay, you have to legalize these different types of middle housing types, but here's 9 different kinds, you have to pick 6 out of 9. And they get to choose. So there is autonomy, and that can reflect their local character and variability.
Well, I wish we had more time, especially with that rousing call to action to be bold, which we really appreciate, Senator. Unfortunately, we have our next panel, so will you please join me in thanking our panelists, and thank you for this lively conversation. Thank you all.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Katie L. Colledy, and I'm a principal at Clark Neuber. Clark Neuber is an accounting firm here in Bellevue, and we've been providing tax consulting and audit services for over 70 years to the Pacific Northwest. That was a great panel, and we're ready for number 2. So the next panel is called A Model for Success, Wilburton, and we'll explore a case study right here in our very own backyard. By taking advantage of various incentive programs and policies to boost housing production, the Wilburton neighborhood has become an avenue of opportunity for tackling Bellevue's housing crisis. I'd like to introduce the panel next. KGIP's co-founder, Steve Kramer, has more than 30 years of experience in commercial real estate, facilitating the needs of his clients in each phase. He's been directly involved in over $1.5 billion in real estate transactions, providing them with his expertise in acquisitions, development, and disposition. Next, Neil Mulnick is a principal at Clover Capital, where he oversees property acquisition, asset management, and capital allocation. He specializes in distressed and value-add strategies, having previously worked as a consultant for Ernst & Young and a project management leader at Aptio. Catherine Hollis is Executive Director of East Trail Partners, a not-for-profit unifying and catalyzing the vision for a fully connected 42-mile East Trail. Their mission is to create a thriving trail that reflects the diversity of the Puget Sound in partnership with communities, business, and governments, and they have some exciting updates coming. As the Pacific Northwest Managing Director for Alliance Residential Company, Jeremiah Joliker is responsible for the sourcing and development process of all projects in Seattle and Portland. Specifically, he oversees market review, strategy evaluation, land opportunity negotiation, and more. And last but not least, we have our moderator, Holly Golden. Holly is an attorney at HCMP. She uses her deep land experience to deliver client solutions to complex urban land development and permitting issues. Serving as counsel on some of the region's most significant projects, she works with residential, commercial, life science, and not-for-profit clients. I saw Holly moderate last week. Nice to see you again. And she'll do a great job. So thanks everyone for being here, and enjoy the panel.
Good morning, everyone. As mentioned, I'm Holly Golden, a land use attorney over at Hillis Clark and proud Bellevue Chamber member. It is my pleasure to be moderating this morning's panel about the Wilburton rezone, a chance to see a lived example of some of the policy ideas we heard about in the first panel. So let's dive in. Steve, before we get into the weeds, maybe you could give us a little bit of background on the Wilburton neighborhood, particularly for folks in the room that might not be as familiar with this part of town. Where is Wilburton? How big is it? And why is it its own little neighborhood?
Sure, thank you. So we got a little map up there. Let's try this. There we go. So we've got a map here. This is a 300-acre boundary that starts down at Main Street, kind of on the south, and goes all the way up to Northeast 12th, bounded by the 405 and 120th. So known as Auto Row for most of us for most of my time I've been here. But the city embarked, it's almost been a decade-long journey to get to where we are now. And the result and the concept is that this area is sort of helping downtown with its growth, because downtown is surrounded on three sides by single-family housing. So there's really only one way to grow, and that's to the east. But the goal here is to create a very high-density, sort of non-car centric neighborhood that's for biking and walking, live, work, play, mixed use zoning. And the city took a while, but came up with a really thoughtful outcome and did a lot of outreach to the community. We traveled the world to Copenhagen and looking at some really inspirational walking and biking neighborhoods. And what makes the opportunity to do that so unique is its infrastructure. And so if you look at the map, you'll see right up the center, what I call the spine of Wilburton, and will be the heart of Wilburton going forward, is the East Trail. And it's 100-foot wide. It'll be a linear park when the county and the city is done building it out, that will really allow people to traverse this area biking and walking, and to go to shops and to hopefully to work and to your home. And then ultimately you'll see the orange there is the city's vision of the Grand Connection, which is another amazing piece of infrastructure which will connect the east and the west. So the boundaries of the freeway will be broken down. That is going to be 2,200 feet, but it's going to be dead level for walking and biking to get back and forth to the city. And then obviously we all got real excited on Saturday when the train opened. You see the train goes through, and Wilburton is served on the north by the Spring District, in the center right at the Whole Food Station, and at the south on the other side of the freeway at Main Street. But we've got every mode of transportation possible there. And so the city's goal to build out 15,000 homes and 35,000 new jobs over the next couple decades, they've really laid the groundwork, and it was a great process working with everybody at the city, and the Planning Commission did the hard work first. But we're here now, and really excited to get going.
Great, excellent overview of Wilburton. I actually just learned this week that my husband grew up referring to the Wilburton neighborhood, and specifically the baseball fields, as Wilby. And I'm so sad that we spent a year talking about Wilburton probably 14 times a day without giving it a nickname, but it's not too late. And Neil, speaking of those daily conversations, you were deeply involved in the Wilburton rezone negotiation, along with other developers, Wilburton landowners, land use attorneys. Can you tell us about some of the issues that you wrestled with among the various stakeholders, the residents, landowners, planning commission, council, staff, affordable housing partners, and what was key to some of the compromises?
So just a few stakeholders there for Wilby. I have to say, first and foremost, we ended up with a great code, and it took a bit, but between city council, planning commission, and staff, we really got there. And we'll talk about some of the successes, but you can really see it with the code. Wilburton is one of those 10-year-long overnight successes. And so, starting in 2016 versus when we picked it back up in 22 and finished last year, the world looked completely different. And so you think about what the stakeholder expectations were post-COVID, post-zero interest rate environment, post-office collapse, runaway inflation. And so we went from office to affordable housing. And so, there's a lot of different things that factor into that. Wilburton's unique in that, Steve talked about it being auto row. I don't think anyone looks at that and says, that's what it should be. So, I think there's this aligned incentive that it needs to change. It can be the next great, dense, urban, walkable neighborhood in Bellevue. But you have a lot of landowners who, sometimes, they've owned it for generations, decades, little to no debt, great cash flow. And so when you have a major rezone, how do you balance the public benefit that generates versus it being economically viable? And so that balance is really where a lot of the conversation hinged on. So, by the time the rezone's done, we're not in a great development environment. And so our mantra was, how do you make this code buildable from day one? And what are the things we can compromise on to make that happen? And so as you start kind of getting into the nitty gritty and you look at open space, what can we do there? What can we do with step backs and setbacks? KG and us did a study for every 10 feet that you give up on a building, how many units are we sacrificing? And so where can we push on these areas to really drive more housing, make it more affordable? Can we have a catalyst program that we were successful in getting? Can we do a multifamily tax exemption supercharger so that we can see more development happen sooner? And so kind of all of these little things stack up, and in the end of the day, they just reduce the cost of the code that make it more buildable sooner so we can drive more housing units. And so I think at the end of the day, between all the stakeholders, the thing that we can all get behind is this is a neighborhood that's ripe for a lot of density and change, and this is where a lot of housing can go. And so when everyone's kind of aligned on that and you really focus on day one, how can we make this code buildable, that's how you get to the really great outcome that we got to.
Excellent. And I want to hear more about those specific projects that each of you have cooking. So we've talked about what Wilburton is, and now we want to get into the details. I'm going to start with you, Jeremiah, but just to frame this up, the Wilburton legislation passed in June 2025, and since then there have been applications submitted for over 2,300 housing units just in Wilburton. And by comparison, yeah, that's a woohoo. By comparison, in 2025, in the entire city of Seattle, there were just under 2,000 applications for housing units, or applications for just under 2,000 units. So really incredible comparison, says something about the enthusiasm for Wilburton and probably says something else about Seattle. But I'd love to hear from you all about why you're among those that are excited about Wilburton, what specific projects you have in the pipeline, and how those projects are different or unique because they're in Wilburton.
Yeah, well, we've been working in Bellevue really for about 12 years, and we've done a few projects in the downtown square. And during call it 8-10 years ago, trying to compete with office developers for land downtown and not really having anywhere else near downtown to develop was real difficult. It was tough to pry land and compete on the land. So with the Wilburton change, which to everyone's credit, the city of Bellevue, the chamber, and all the stakeholders, the Wilburton Code is a huge improvement on what we've dealt with in downtown, and the need for housing in Bellevue is obviously there, especially given the employment and population growth. So we were kind of on the front end. I had a couple of pieces of property already under control before the code was even improved, but really it was just the need for the housing downtown. Yep.
Great, Neil.
Yeah, I think when you look at what we're able to accomplish in Wilburton, you just see that there's so much opportunity there. Kind of Steve mentioned it, but there's like an embarrassment of riches of the public infrastructure coming before the housing comes. And that's so unique. You don't really see that in many other areas. And so when you look at the opportunity there with all of the amenities in the neighborhood, 4 grocery stores and a quarter mile of the auto row there, 2 light rail stations, the Grand Connection crossing coming across, light rail open, and it just becomes, an unbelievable opportunity. I think some of the specifics in the code really focus on being able to drive to immediate building, things like larger floor plates on mid-rise housing, and just being able to accomplish day one buildability. And so, there's so much opportunity for density there. We're just really excited for the upcoming projects.
Steve, you want to talk about yours?
Well, I can talk about our project specifically, but generally, I'd also like to highlight that the code is intended to be mixed-use code. So while we're excited about the housing, we're also excited about jobs creation. And despite the sort of somber office report that CB gave earlier, things are moving in the right direction. And ultimately, for this neighborhood to achieve its promise is to have a place that is truly live, work, play. We want employers to embrace Wilburton as well, so that people, literally are just right there. And you look at our site right here. This is a 7-acre site that is right at the confluence of where the Grand Connection and the East Rail will meet. And our goal right now is to create a ground plane and an interface between the Grand Connection and Catherine's East Rail here that will make it unique. It'll be a place that people want to be, not just something that you're passing through, but a place that you will want to live there, you will want to work there. Visitors who come to town say, hey, have you been over to that Wilburton area? You got to go check that out. And so the ground plane and taking advantage of this infrastructure that Neil talked about, the trail and the Grand Connection, those are not auto transportation. Those are different. And so we're starting this little red box you might see. Those of you anybody go over and buy a Cadillac or a Hummer the past couple decades, but that's the old Cadillac dealership, and we're under construction right now. We're planning to open this summer. It just kind of came out. A good place to go have some fun. It's going to be called Willie Burton's, and it's going to be a food hall with 3 great food operators and a bar and an outdoor beer garden and playground for the kids. You'll be able to ride right off the trail or drive by your car or take the train. But our partners, Harrison Street Asset Management, they're terrific. They just had a vision. They bought this land with us 10 years ago. They're in it for the long haul, and they're really wanting to jumpstart the neighborhood by giving us all a community place where we can go and have some fun, and sort of say, hey, I could see myself working here, living here. So mid-July, hopefully everybody will there. You read about the operators if you have, but Marcus Lalario, Little Woody's, and Brady Ishiwata Williams. He's a James Beard Award winner, Tomo restaurant, and ex-Canlis chef. But the whole idea is come on over, and this is the start of the ground plane that we want to have in this neighborhood, so that people will go and enjoy it. And however you get there, you got a lot of choices of how to get there. And then after that, we're going to start. We're part of those 23 or 400 permits. We've got 600 units underway in the permitting process. But in addition to that, we're building 20,000 feet of retail that, again, interfaces directly on the trail. That's the front door. 1/16 is kind of the back door, but it's you need both. But we really want to create that walking and biking neighborhood, so we're really going to engage with the trail.
Excellent. Captain, I'm going to turn to you in just a moment, but first, Jeremiah, a follow-up question for you. As you mentioned, Alliance was one of the earliest applicants for a residential permit in Wilburton, and there you go. And we've heard that enthusiasm from fellow panelists, but at the same time, we've seen diminishing interest in nearby markets. Some have cited economic concerns and land costs. Others point to borrowing rates or inclusionary mandates as barriers. But Wilburton remains strong. So what's the difference with Wilburton, and what are some of the factors at play?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly wouldn't say our interest is diminished in, the other Eastside markets. For example, just finished 400 units downtown Redmond last year, started 200 in Kirkland last year. So we're certainly trying and continue to have interest. You mentioned two things, though, land and inclusionary. So with costs being relatively the same, for the same product type in each of the various Eastside markets, you don't have a lot of variables in your development budget to play with other than land. And the inclusionary requirements, we've obviously worked with inclusionary requirements going back to, I don't know, when Portland did their inclusionary move a little over a decade ago. They have a significant impact on the amount that we can pay for land. And as that, land value decreases, getting property owners to sell is a lot harder. So I would say, while we're still, looking and trying in the other markets, what happened in Wilburton, really up until the supercharger was approved, we weren't sure if we were going to even be able to go. So kudos to the city for the supercharger. I think it made a huge impact.
And for those that might not be huge land use nerds like us, the supercharger that you've heard referred to a couple times is multifamily tax exemption supercharger that allows you to overlap your mandatory affordable units in your project with affordable units that you voluntarily provide in exchange for a tax exemption. And that overlap really unlocked a lot of potential in Wilburton. So Catherine, another part of what makes Wilburton so great, besides the MFTE supercharger, is access to downtown, but also East Rail and the Promise of Grand Connection. I think it's time for a shameless plug for the East Rail partners. What is East Rail? How did it come to be? And why is it important for the development of the Wilburton neighborhood?
I think Steve and others have queued this up well, but a little background on the East Rail. So it's a former rail line running from Snohomish down to Renton, so 42 miles on the east side, and it's a multi-use corridor. So through Bellevue, there's a huge sewer pipe underneath it, sort of the unsexy pieces, but integral to all of this development. So there are a lot of entities involved in the effort as well. It goes through 9 different owner entities and jurisdictions. I see a few lawmakers here today that sit on the East Trail Regional Advisory Council, which is how the governments come together on the project. There's about almost 20 miles opened with about 22 to go. So while it is still an idea in places, I feel like the way that we've talked about East Trail and Bellevue has changed dramatically since our organization started in 2020. It has truly gone from an idea to open sections of trail and direct connections with light rail. The Wilburton station is the first example that we really have found in the country where transit and trail have been planned in conjunction to say we need to create options, right? This isn't an either or, it's an and. So while it is more than just Bellevue, it's a regional project, but it's really about connecting communities. And so when you think about Bellevue, you've got a couple big highways in the city that really dissect different areas of the city, and a completed East Trail from the south through the city is going to connect communities in a new way as well. And when I think about Wilburton, it is one of the areas on the trail that really has this opportunity to be more than just a trail. I think I saw Councilmember Falcone from Kirkland here. The Google campus in Kirkland is probably the first example of how we can think about a trail being more than just a trail, that it's a linear park with true public spaces for community. It has the first retail that has happened on the East Trail. Chainline Station Brewery is right there on the trail. So what we can do in Wilburton is, thousands times that. As we look at what the city has done with zoning, what developers are thinking about 2 front doors to their buildings, and that the East Trail coming through the heart of Wilburton and really being the heart of Wilburton. But we've also talked about the development in downtown Bellevue, and that's one piece of Bellevue. So the Grand Connection crossing, the actual bridge going over from downtown to East Trail, is also going to be key in making these connections and creating those options. So that's a little bit about the East Trail overall. As a nonprofit, we started in 2020 to really help unify and catalyze this effort. So again, 42 miles of trail. A lot has been funded. We've got a lot to go. So our organization was really established to help unify things, to really lead the advocacy for governmental funding. In our first 5 years, we helped bring over $75 million to the trail effort through state and federal funding. A lot of folks in the room were involved in different ways in that, so thank you. We also work with the private sector. So we were honored to work with REI and Meta for the first direct trail investment with East Trail for a project, the Northup Connector, right near the Spring District. Again, as we look across the country, it's a pretty unique example of private sector coming in and directly investing in infrastructure and sort of that last in funding. And then we were honored to work with Amazon for their historic $7.5 million investment in the Wilburton Trestle. So does anyone in the room not know where the Wilburton Trestle is? It's an old, okay, I'm getting some laughs, that's good. Old railroad bridge. There's currently 2 cranes sitting on it. It is very much under construction with summer 2027 estimated opening. We really think that that is going to be a destination in and of itself. But again, it's going to be one of these last gaps that we need to have a continued East Trail. So working with the private sector. And the third piece of our organization is really bringing community into this effort. If we're going to invest lots of tax dollars and governmental dollars into this infrastructure, how do we ensure that it is something for everyone every day? And that comes back to this development piece and why this nonprofit is sitting on a panel with developers, in that all of this goes together to create just a livable city and to build Bellevue up. And I mean, Steve said it, so I don't need to keep repeating it, but they're just, all these pieces go together, which is really exciting. So Bellevue, the other place on the corridor that really is set up for trail-oriented development in the future will be sort of the downtown Woodinville area, but Wilburton is ready to go, and it's really exciting.
Super exciting. And maybe sticking with this theme a little bit longer, you mentioned the Grand Connection, which we've been hearing about for years. The vision has evolved a bit, but very exciting multimodal connection from downtown. Could you say a little bit more about the Grand Connection crossing and how that plays into the vision for Wilburton?
Yeah, a group of stakeholders come together called the Friends of the Grand Connection Crossing to really think about that one connection from City Hall Plaza across 405. Again, we have a pretty separated Bellevue with 405, and so making that connection to really connect downtown to downtown 2 or the other front door, however we want to think about the future of Wilburton. So it's been really important for our organization to work hand in hand with the Friends of the Grand Connection and the city, both on East Trail and on the Grand Connection, as we think about really making this everything it can. And that Wilburton isn't standing alone as its own space in Bellevue, but it's connected. I think the last piece I would share is that those 2 pieces of infrastructure aren't going to be enough to really connect the city. So as we think about what we're investing in East Trail, what we're investing in the Grand Connection Crossing, we also need the city thinking about other connections to that infrastructure to really connect the city.
Excellent. All right, going back to the sausage making of Wilburton a little bit. The Chamber and the Housing Development Consortium formed a partnership called the Eastside Housing Roundtable, which played a unique multi-year role in getting the Wilburton rezone across the line. Neil, maybe we'll start with you. How did this negotiating structure come together, and what made it so successful? And I see our time check, so we'll wrap this one up.
We would not. Is it still working? There we go. We would not be sitting here singing the praises of Wilburton without the efforts of the Chamber and Joe and Jody and Patience Malaba from the Housing Consortium. Their efforts were just absolutely essential. And I think a bunch of planning commissioners and city council members said it well when they said, when you have 2 groups who are usually yelling at each other from across the table, sitting on the same side of the table, pushing the same thing, shut up, get out of the way, listen, and go forward. And that was really what got us the multifamily tax exemption supercharger. And without that, as we just heard, this code is not buildable. And so, what we realized is we really have aligned incentives. No matter what we do, make it easier to build more housing, make it quicker, make it cheaper, and that's what we got out of kind of the Eastside Housing Roundtable. And so just a huge thank you to the Chamber and to Patience for kind of wrangling a lot of people together. And we can take that example into the other codes the city's working on, like Bell Red and some of the other areas, where it's absolutely essential to fund some of these kind of mandatory inclusionary policies that are important to drive, affordability, but we can't ruin the economic viability of the projects as well.
Perfect. Well, thank you all so much for sharing your expertise. It's exciting to hear about the continued enthusiasm for investment in Bellevue, and I can't wait to see some shovels in the ground in Wilby.
I'm Matthew Samwick, CEO of Innovation Realty Partners. It is my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker for today, Andrew Samwick, who I can guarantee I know better than anyone, as he's my brother. Now, knowing Andrew every day of his life comes with its challenges, including introducing him. Now, knowing Andrew every day of his life comes with its challenges, like when I got a C on a math test and he could do calculus in his head, or when I got an incomplete because I did not do a required paper in junior high and he wrote a treatise on the human eye in the 2nd grade. But to sum it all up, I would get off the bus at school and the teachers would say to me, "Why can't you be more like your brother?" instead of hello. Beyond being my brother and our parents' favorite child, and a better human than student, his list of achievements is long. Summa cum laude from Harvard when he was 19, a PhD from MIT, to name a few. From there, Andrew joined the Dartmouth faculty in 1994, where he later became the youngest tenured professor in Dartmouth history. His early scholarly work covered a range of topics, including Social Security, pensions, saving, taxation, more on that in a minute, portfolio choice, and executive compensation, while his teaching and some of his more recent scholarship has expanded to include social entrepreneurship and education finance. From 2003 to 2004, he joined the staff of the President's Council of Economic Advisors, serving for a year as its chief economist. Then from 2004 to 2019, he served as the director of the Nelson Rockefeller Center at Dartmouth, and from 2021 to 2023, had the honor of chairing the Department of Economics. Not bad, huh? Despite the wide gap in educational achievement between the two of us, I have never been anything but proud of him and honored to be his brother. Everyone, please join me in welcoming Andrew Samwick.
It's been a pleasure. Where can you go and get a generous introduction like that from your brother you admire very much, and to be treated like a celebrity? I feel very much at home in the Pacific Northwest, not just the family connection and the red carpet treatment. My wife and I spent a good chunk of our honeymoon here 26 years ago. And so when you do one of these things, you're just wondering, how am I ever going to establish a connection with my audience so that they will take seriously anything I have to say? And so I figured it out as a guy who's lived in New England for 40 years. It had to be our mutual distrust and animosity toward the New York Yankees, especially this week. I mean, you didn't really think I was going to get up here and talk about the Super Bowl, did you? But actually, it's the year in Washington that I'm just going to leave this up here for the rest of the talk. It was the year in Washington where I figured out why I feel so at home here. I was there for a piece of the Bush administration, and it was very eye-opening. So what do I do as a professor? I'm in the knowledge production and dissemination business. So I figured if they wanted me to go to Washington, where I got to be, it's a great job title because it's too long, so people cut out the less relevant bits. But I was the chief economist on the staff of the President's Council of Economic Advisors. So I and the chief of staff sort of ran the shop in support of the three presidential appointees. It was an eye-opening experience because the garden variety staffer at the Office of Management and Budget had as much knowledge as I could produce or disseminate already up here. It was weird to go to Washington and figure out that the scarce commodity in the room, the constraint, wasn't knowledge production or dissemination. It's actually knowledge translation, the ability to translate what you know into some socially beneficial outcome. And so for the last couple of hours, what have we been listening to? We've been listening to people trying to translate what they know into something better for the community, not just for themselves, but for everybody. And I think you should take a moment to appreciate that. If you've read Robert Rubin's memoir, The Yellow Pad, people talk about the Rubin question. What would people 20 years from now who knew that we were in a room together today wish we would have decided at that meeting when we had the chance? And I think you score very well on that. This is a forward-looking group thinking about the future of the East Side. And so I am the Johnny-come-lately to that activity. So the question is, what can I add? So I thought about a lot of things I could tell you about that are probably on your mind and an economist would have something to say about. Here are two that I think we can park. The first one is tariffs. You don't really compete with foreign suppliers for putting your final product in the ground. I know it's a broader mix of people in the room than just housing. But generally, you're going to face higher import prices. I'm sorry, on your inputs. But actually, the tariff story has a silver lining. I think it appeals to the president because it's a place where, I don't know how to say this gently, he can exceed his authority and sort of get away with it for a while. But you've seen that the court cases have sort of pulled it back. So it sort of appeals to the way the president tends to go about his business. And the luckiest thing we've gotten is that, by and large, the rest of the world has not retaliated. They kind of understand that this is fairly temporary, and they're not turning this into a multi-sided trade war. If they had, we'd be talking about that. The other thing is we have a new nominee to succeed Jerome Powell at the Fed. It's Kevin Warsh. Certainly, of anybody who was discussed on the short list, this is the very best choice that could be made. This is not the reason why it's a good choice. I had the opportunity to meet Kevin when I was at the Council of Economic Advisors. He was one of the people carrying the title Special Assistant to the President at the National Economic Council, one of the 4 policy councils at the White House. Super smart, open-minded, creative, professional. If you've seen him speak about financial matters, you know he's got the goods. And you don't have to listen to me. You can just look at what happened in the markets when the intent to appoint him was announced. Gold and silver prices plummeted. So I'm sorry if you had that in your portfolio, but you probably had it as a hedge, and that means this is okay. That's because what the Fed does for us is basically threefold. The first is price stability. That is job number one. There is no other entity that can tackle that like the Fed can. The second is bank supervision, a role that the Fed didn't used to have to actively play in the way that it has in the wake of the financial crisis in 2007 through 2009. And the third thing is policy independence. And yes, I think Warsh will be good on all three. So again, we dodged a bullet there. That's fantastic. The two things I'm going to talk to you about are sort of the micro environment of AI and what that might mean around us. Everyone has predictions, like we heard earlier, from it will achieve nirvana to it will annihilate us, and so obviously it's hopefully something in the middle. But before I get there, I want to talk about the macro environment. Today has been a wonderfully micro discussion of all things East Side. This is not good news. These are not good outcomes. If we go back to 2024, so before the reconciliation bill last year that is called the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, we were running a deficit of 6.4% of GDP. The maximum deficit you should ever seek to run outside of wartime or a recession is probably 3% of GDP, because that could match the growth of real GDP, and so the debt to GDP ratio would stay stable. This is going to continue to grow the debt to GDP ratio and essentially mortgage our future in an important way. Okay, so that was 4.9 trillion of revenues against 6.8 trillion of spending. And we have just become habituated to running these deficits. And then what do? What are our policymakers in Washington, D.C. doing? They decided to pass the reconciliation bill, which is going to add $340 billion on average to that deficit every year over the next 10 years. But wait, there's more. We have Social Security and Medicare, which are old age entitlement programs. We have a population that is sort of completing the transition from when the baby boom generation was a large productive cohort of workers to when the baby boom generation is the large set, cohort of newly retired people. Well, when the trust funds hit zero, the programs run out of their authorization to spend money without an act of Congress, which would mean 23% benefit cuts to Social Security, 11% to Medicare Part A. Medicare Parts B and D, the supplemental and the prescription drugs, they're already only covered 25% by the premiums that beneficiaries pay. So a general fund deficit is already sort of baked in there. So the baseline is bad. The entitlements are going to make it worse. The only act of Congress that we've seen in the last couple of years is going to make it, has made it even worse. And really, 90% of the growth of expenditures is just a few things. It's Social Security, it's Medicare, it's veterans benefits, and it's interest. These are all things that we've said that we want, and so we are eventually going to have to pay for them. But the contrast here is that it doesn't look like Washington policymakers are in the mood for any sort of reconciliation there. That's a problem. Where will that problem show up? Well, I think that means that over the next decade, we're just going to have to get used to elevated financing and input costs. The financing costs being that there'll be upward pressure on interest rates, and there's very little the Fed can do about the long end of the yield curve. There'll be downward pressure on the value of the dollar. I'm more pessimistic about that than many of my fellow economists. I think the reason is that in the past, whenever something happens in the global economy, even if the United States creates it, there's a flight to quality. And the quality has historically been the US dollar. I think over time the world is decoupling from that, so I don't think that will save us. So that's the bad news, right? You're gonna get worsening on interest rates, you're gonna get worsening on exchange rates, you're gonna get worsening on inflation. Is there a silver lining to that? Yes. Most of what we've talked about today are issues on the supply side of the market. So just as a counterfactual, you had a decade or more of one of the most favorable interest rate environments that you could have, and still we're talking about housing shortages. So it wasn't these factors that caused us to get into the biggest part of the problem that we're in, so that they turned from tailwinds into headwinds may not have the damage that you would think just by thinking about an adverse macro environment. Okay, so I understand that there's been a little bit of fiscal policy action in the home state of Washington lately. And I coined the phrase, you got a little California curious about this. And yeah, the combination of what's now happened with the income tax, the capital gains tax, and your longstanding estate tax makes this less favorable for the people who in the private sector are going to drive economic growth. It was an old adage in the Samwick household growing up that the worker doesn't get rich until the boss gets rich, right? It's just not organized in any other way. And you've seen what happens in other places where you impose things that appear to be punitive against people who earn income, meaning they generate economic output. Okay, so you've sort of moved down the road. I do want to say, though, that you can't let this, if you are disturbed by it, sort of change your view about tax and expenditure policy more generally. My favorite short quote from an economist is from Milton Friedman. He says, "To spend is to tax." And the reason why that's true is that once you've committed to the spending, then eventually the tax revenues have to follow. There are so few things that actually within the public sector pay for themselves. Think investments in very young children in their health and well-being. Those things tend to pay off. Even leaving aside the private benefits, in the public benefits through reduced expenditures, greater tax revenue later. Okay, so you're in a budgeting problem, but I want to encourage you to think about the following counterfactual. Imagine that the state of Washington had decided 25 years ago to impose a modest tax increase, at the outside just a modest income tax increase. Enough to raise non-trivial revenue, but not enough to derail the fantastic growth that you've experienced. And they would have dedicated it to infrastructure. Imagine how different your life would be. Imagine how different the agenda of the meeting of the Bellevue Chamber might be if that had happened. And the difference there is not that you're raising taxes or you're not raising taxes, it's what you're doing with the proceeds of those taxes. So the discussions that you have need to be focused on how are we going to spend the money that the public sector takes in to enhance the quality of living for us and future generations. So whatever your opinions are about this particular tax policy and what it might mean if it's not stricken down in the roadblocks that are sort of built up for it, I think this is a room that understands that you need the public sector actively involved, and it's how the public sector gets involved that matters. Okay, by the way, that little rant about taxes might not be so bad is also how you distinguish between the two Sandwick brothers. Okay, so let me move now to thinking about AI. And it's a terrible disservice to all of us that what we're looking at is hard to define, and the commentary on it is hyperbolic in almost every dimension. So what you should do is unplug from Twitter, and you should go talk to people who might be on the front lines of this. Nick Bloom and his co-authors, he's a professor at Stanford, did a survey of about 6,000 top executives in the US, the UK, Germany, and Australia. And the bottom line was that over the next 3 years, they forecast perhaps a percentage point, even less, as a reduction in employment at their various institutions. That seems okay, that seems small. It's an average that includes lots of more extreme cases in particular firms. But the part about this that I find troubling is if you were thinking about it and you were going to reduce labor costs because you had found this thing that was going to enhance productivity, what's the easiest labor to reduce? It's the people you haven't hired yet. And those are disproportionately young people, my students after I'm done with them. And so we should be mindful of what that looks like. These are stepping stone jobs into more productive careers later. The young person you employ today is a potential member of this chamber 15 years from now. And so you have to be mindful that the burden of these short-term reductions in employment don't fall disproportionately on a single cohort. In the long term, things change around quite a lot because the adoption of any productive technology tends to expand, lower costs and expand the demand for that product, and with that expansion in demand comes an increase in employment in those sectors, possibly in different jobs than the jobs that we've lost. So you can see that this is already happening on some scale. AI data center construction is running at about 2% of GDP. That's an absurdly high number for one thing that we can name. You may have seen something called the Citrini memo floating around about 6 weeks ago, where it was one of these dark, gloomy stories about what AI would do. Citadel just posted a graph in response to it showing the hiring trends for software engineers. So not the entry-level coders, they stopped their continued decline about a year ago, and they started to tick up. Why? Because it's the software engineer who is essential, complementary to this new technology. And we continue to get a slight upward trend in new business formation in the post-COVID period. So really what you're in is a race between the short term and the long term. The most immediate things that happen is, oh, well, I don't need to hire this person to add a sixth person to my team because the other 5 working with this AI can do the work that I would have previously gotten out of 6, right? At the margin, that's happening in the short term. But in the longer term, some sectors are going to grow. It was wonderful to hear about the application of AI to reduce the bottleneck in the permitting program. In the permitting process, I wish you all the success you could possibly have in that. And to the extent that that takes off, then all the things that are bottlenecked by the permitting process, those tend to grow, and that will pull in labor. So I had another professor in graduate school who said, in economics, things take longer to happen than you think they will, and then they happen faster than you thought they could. Okay, so that is sort of universally applicable. So you may have also seen a couple of weeks ago a nice thing floating around on Substack about ATMs and the employment of bank tellers. And I think this is the best parable, so I'll review it for you. So ATMs started to be deployed in the late 1970s in response to what was then a fairly high cost of labor. So this was a labor-saving investment. And what happened to teller employment if you could literally have something called an automatic teller machine? Well, it turns out that the employment of bank tellers didn't particularly fall and continued to grow over the next several decades. But if you were to look around now and compare it to the 1970s, you would see dramatically fewer bank tellers working. In contrast to the rollout of the ATM, which really just take the job of a teller in the 1970s, unpack it into all of its constituent tasks, take some of those tasks and now assign them to the machine, which can do them more efficiently, and roll up the remaining tasks and perhaps new ones that those employees can do and call that a new job. So that happened in proportion to the growth of branch banking, which is why you need to employ tellers. The reason why you have so many fewer tellers today is that you have many fewer bank branches and investment in bank branches than you used to. Why? It's because of that thing in your pocket. It's because the iPhone revolutionized the way you engage with the bank as a whole, and now you don't need to go into the bank anymore. So what's the lesson of this about any new technology? The technology that just unpackages tasks and reassembles them is going to have effects at the margin. But at the core of it, you're not really going to see big changes until the new technology just completely revolutionizes the way we do business as usual. That's why I found this to be such a compelling example of what we might expect with any new technology. I mean, just sort of speaking for myself, my use of AI has been awesome. Think about what I do. I take in queries from people who are not specialists. I search my proprietary database of knowledge to try to formulate an answer, and then I give them the answer in intelligible English. AI can do all of that amazingly well. It's very good at taking your poorly articulated question because you're not a specialist and helping you reframe it into a better question. Its data set is perfect recall of whatever it's been trained on. Recall is not perfect. And then you can iterate with it very easily to get out an intelligible answer to it. In a lot of ways, this is just what should have been on your computer all along and has finally made the computer on your desk or on your lap to be useful and productive in a way that our friends in the hardware and software business have been trying for a very long time. This should just be what's in a computer. So it's really been kind of fantastic for me, because in all those years where I was chairing departments and directing policy centers, my technical skills were slipping. But with Claude on my computer, I'm back, baby. You know, I'm out there doing research that, you know, doesn't show my age in a particular way. So what does all this mean for folks on the East Side? You have a lot of structural strengths. I mean, I live in Vermont, so I look at the natural landscape, and when it's good, I notice, and you've got it. You don't have to give up living close to nature in order to sort of go to work in a high productivity sector. That's pretty fantastic. You are likely going to get net in-migration over the next decade, and I think you can compete successfully for residents who can choose where they want to live. And that's the key to the health of any organization. When people have choice, do they choose you? So I think you've all got that. In this room in particular, it's sort of a mystery among economists as to why measured productivity, I'm not trying to make any enemies here, but measured productivity in the construction sector has remained stubbornly low. I'll give you an example from my area. We don't build schools every year in my area, which is not growing too much. The last one we built was 2012. There's now a new one being considered. The price per square foot in those 14 years has tripled. That is evidence of a real challenge in the local construction productivity, but it exists if you look at nationwide data. There was a really nice paper that was just written, very, very on point for the earlier panel, by an economist, John Gruber, out of MIT, and an economist, Evan Soltis, out of Princeton, where they got data from Los Angeles County, where they were able to scrape the whole database. And there are many sales in Los Angeles County of developable land pre-permit, and then the same property post-permit. And they showed that the increase in price per square foot between those was enough to explain about a third of the cost difference between construction and home prices. Maybe the specialists in the room say, yeah, that's just what you got to do. That's what it should be. But that to people in my business, that was a real eye-opener. So those are the challenges, and it's really nice to be in a room where people have identified the challenges and are really focused on trying to solve them. And I'm starting to wrap up about AI and my prepared remarks generally. I say this to my students. In this world, you get paid for basically three things: hustle, judgment, and luck. We've all seen people get paid for luck, so that belongs on the slide. But most of what people classify as luck is actually hustle or judgment. They just don't want to face the reality of it. AI accelerates hustle and it sharpens judgment. It really is an opportunity to be better at our jobs, working in collaboration with something that has very good access to a vast knowledge base. For what I agree is an initially subsidized price of about $20 a month, I am much more productive when I am working on my scholarly activities. Weeks worth of work that I probably wouldn't have even done because I wouldn't have been able to accomplish it on my own, I can now do in days, and the quality is higher. And so what I also tell my students is that there's really only one skill out there that matters, and it's curiosity. And so what you really need to do is to be open to new technologies and to experiment with them. And so to sort of wrap up, I give you my call to action to echo things we've heard earlier. The first thing is that judgment matters. We are going to face macroeconomic headwinds, and we are going to simultaneously need to invest in all of our regions, but for you, the East Side, your long-term future. And so the choices you make today will have real consequences going forward. The second thing is that hustle matters. And it's nice to get up at 7:30 in the morning, come here, and see all this hustle in the room. That may also be how you distinguish the two Samwick brothers, is that one's got a lot more hustle than the other. So continue to attack those bottlenecks on the supply. I think you got a godsend. I know she had to leave, but when you have a state senator who's running housing policy, telling you that the way she evaluates anything coming before her is whether this will increase the supply of housing, you have got a gift, and you should take advantage of that. Because if you have the opposite, I mean, all of this stuff on the demand side, trying to make it easier for buyers, more affordable for buyers, if you don't call forth the supply response, what does that do? It just raises the value of the existing stock to which you're not adding, which it gives, you know, boomers and Gen X like me, it just gives us a fat capital gain and doesn't really do anything for affordability. So if you have that, that's good. Curiosity matters, and I think luck matters as well. You have quite a bit of natural advantage here, and I encourage you to steward that carefully as you're doing and pay it forward. Thank you.
One of these is going to work. There we go.
Oh, look at you. Now you got to go.
There we go. Now I got to stay away from you. All right, we got about 8 minutes for a little Q&A that we're going to do very quickly, and so we're going to do a little shuffle around the stage, but I'm going to throw a quick question out to you on the housing front, which is, we've got a model in this country around housing that it is both a store of wealth, both intergenerationally and also for your own personal wealth and retirement, and it should be affordable. Can those two actually live in harmony with one another, or do we just have a model of housing policy that economically doesn't necessarily work?
I think I would answer that by asking you to consider a counterfactual. What if everything you said was true, but that housing prices were appreciating only at the rate of GDP growth, the growth in the whole economy? Well, then people would be building wealth and affordability would be preserved for anybody whose wages were keeping up with GDP growth. And so if it would work, if it would answer the question in that case, then it must be departures from that that are causing us not to be able to balance both wealth accumulation and wealth accumulation and affordability. And I think the answer is, in part, I'll give you another scary statistic because that's what economists do. If you measure the increase in inflation-adjusted dollars between 2007 and the most recent survey of household wealth in 2022, you would see that $47 trillion of new household net worth has been created. If you look at the change in the federal debt outstanding over that time, it was 23 trillion. So in a sense, we've mortgaged half of the increase in the wealth of the household sector. Okay, there are two very different people who are pocketing the increase in private wealth and the responsibility for servicing the increase in public indebtedness. That's the source of the problem. That's why it feels very unaffordable.
Moving to a macro lens for a moment, I sit here with Joe Quinlan every year from Bank of America, and every year I ask him if this is the year that the dollar is no longer going to be the reserve currency, and he comes with his USA cheerleader outfit every single time that we come to that event. Every year it's going to be the best year ever. It's kind of like listening to the market report from Kemper Development Company. So the question that I've got is, we've learned here, particularly in Bellevue, you don't always have to be faster than the bear, you just have to be faster than your friend. And so you don't have to be faster than the market in Bellevue, you just have to be a little bit better than Seattle. And in the global economy, it's somewhat the same way. So you don't need to have a really great, wonderful currency or a great economy to still be the chosen one. You just need to be better than everybody else. Is anybody else catching up? And if so, who? And are they going to overtake us? Or is it digital currencies and some unregulated or non-nation state actor that is our real competition in the long run?
Okay, so I'm a crypto skeptic. So the attempts to make crypto look like a digital currency have been based on stablecoins and other things that don't even have sort of fractional reserve banking as their advantage. So I don't think that's where it's going to come from. What you saw historically is that U.S. inflation led the world to decouple from the gold standard when it was necessary. So this is the statement: things take longer to happen than you think they will, and then they happen faster than you thought they could. What your friend from Bank of America, and cut him a break, it's the Bank of America, so he's not going to be a bit of a cheerleader. What's he doing there? Right. So the challenge is that we're probably living on borrowed time. And there's an old joke about economists that we've predicted 9 of the last 5 recessions. They're talking about me. I sort of camp out in the more pessimistic side. And I like to be right, but I'm even happier when I'm wrong. So I don't know. I can't foresee what the thing is that is eventually going to trip the rest of the world to decide it's better to pay the fixed costs now to get out of this system where we are sort of a little too beholden to the vagaries of the U.S. economy. Good non-answer?
Well, we got time for one more question here, and it's a little bit of a wide open one, which is, what's the economic, you talked a lot about AI today, but outside of that, what's the one economic factor that you think is going to have the most outstated impact that no one is yet really talking about too carefully today?
So I started with a little bit of baseball. I guess I'm ending with a little bit of baseball. Those of you who watch know what a balk is. It's a sudden, abrupt movement in retreat. I think we really do have to ask ourselves whether we have made it too hard for the millennial generation and the Gen Zs coming after them to actually get enough of an economic toehold as a cohort in order to continue things generally as they're going. I mean, I think if they knew the numbers, the 47 versus the 23 trillion, and that they were the ones who were sort of on the hook to pay down the 23, or at least service it forever, they might balk. They might decide that the intergenerational consequences of what they're being asked to shoulder for generations that basically decided that they wouldn't tax themselves to pay for their own consumption, that they might just decide that no, the way you're going to sort this out in the public sector is not acceptable, and we're not going to participate. So it really is this intergenerational fracture that I'm really worried about. And I've told you I'm a pessimist, where I camp out in the pessimistic place, and I'm really worried about that. And so I think the best things we can do are to invest in the next generation. And I feel like we've, as the so-called grown-ups, I think we've fallen down on that a little bit. And when those consequences come home to roost, we could be in trouble. So I'm sorry not to, you got to get the Bank of America guy back here to do some cheerleading.
Well, as I think about the Bank of America guy, you are the inverse of him. You're a little tax curious, and you have a soft spot for Zennials, and that is the opposite of Joe Quinlan. So I appreciate we open all points of view here at the Bellevue Chamber of Commerce.
You have to consider my day job.
Yeah, fair point. Fair point. Folks, thank you so much for being with us for this great event. I know it's a long 2 hours to sit here early in the morning. I'm going to run through a couple of little housekeeping things before we close it down. But first, let's have a huge round of applause for Andrew Samwick. Thank you so much. I hope that you will all come and join us in 2 weeks on April 16th. We've got our standard lunch program starting back up again. This time we will have Washington Roundtable's Vice President Neil Strigge and RBC Wealth Management's Cindy Ranzau. This is all going to be about a taxapalooza. It's the day after tax day. We're going to be going over what happened federal level, what happened at the state level, what to expect in the future. So come talk about taxes. And then, if you don't make that lunch, be back on May 21st. It's our mid-year economic forecast summit with Brent Beardoll from Washington Federal Bank, and that's always a favorite. And then we're staying with the economics theme, and on July 9th, we will be bringing Sylvain Leduc, who is a masterful economist with the Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco and a real gifted speaker, and so he'll be at that program. So please check out those events at bellevuechamber.org. I want to give a big thanks to our co-presenting sponsors, Microsoft and Amazon, our major sponsors, KGIP, our corporate sponsors, JP Morgan, Clark Nuber, and IMA, our associate sponsors, the Realtors of King County, and of course, Raleigh Properties, Selland Republic Services, and the City of Bellevue. And before, I do want to give one final shout out to the City of Bellevue in particular, and in particular, both Nick Whipple, our speaker today, and all of the folks in his office in the development services and permitting and everything. It really has been a sea change of improvement over the last 3 or 4 years in the way that this city has responded. It has been at the top down, from the council setting that value system and the planning commission, to the hard work of the staff members to really carry it out. The results are really starting to speak for themselves, and they deserve this extra shout out here at the end for the appreciation that all of us have in the development community for their work. A big round of applause to all of our panelists and our speakers. Have a wonderful, wonderful day. Thank you for being here.